Starstruck, a short story by yours truly. Starstruck, a short story by yours truly. Being here was about as exciting as what he was here for. The time had come for him to put the 10 years of research to the test. Percy, the sound rang through him like an empty cathedral, startling him upon hearing his name. No need to daydream, old chum. The dream's now here before us. I know, he said. It's just hard not to imagine what's going to happen, he exclaimed. I mean, we have an idea, but you never really know until it's done. Well then, let's not waste our ambition any further, shall we? Fred was one of his best friends, a co-worker to be exact, a fellow researcher who had been working with him since the project received its first grant and funding began. Friends were a necessary part of exploration, he figured, and he was glad to have one of the best ones he had ever had along for the ride. She's a beauty, isn't she? Fred said in awe. So it's a she, is it? Blame it on all the adventuring pirate books I've read, he said. I can't help but feel like we are about to steal something, and this is our vessel that we are going to ride away on. I guess I can see it, I patronizingly said. Like the whole nature, encompassing understanding, is the ocean, and we are about to set sail. Now you get it? Raising his fist toward me in a sort of juvenile excitement over the whole ordeal. Don't you think, as scientists and as professionals, we should just shake hands? Oh, come on, what is this, the Boy Scouts? We're about to say bon voyage to what we knew and say hello to something alien. Well, all right then. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't follow proper protocol for everything else. Deal, he said, and we bumped fists. Looking at the machine was a sight to behold, at least from his eyes, because he knew what it was. To the foreigner, an explanation would be a must as to what it was they were looking at. He often wondered as to how many things this notion held true, like someone or something coming across a computer fashioned as they are today. Thinking then how many things he came across that held significance to something else, but to him was obscured in peripheral vision upon his focus being elsewhere. Well, let's fire it up, Fred said, jarring him back to attention. I mean, we could have wired it up to initiate upon detecting the brainwaves of you being lost in thought, but we decided to go with this simple button instead, remember? Smiling, I said, ready. Pushing the button was much more anticlimactic than you would think. The only change was an observable display of indicating lights and some data being spewed onto a couple screens. Well, how about that? She works, Fred said, patting me on the back. She turns on, I rebutted. But that doesn't mean we're doing anything significant, the skeptic in me said. Let's take a look then, making our way over to the monitor that was displaying results in real time. Purring like a kitten, Fred said, but in actuality, there was no sound at all, and the purr was entirely visual. Ready for a course correction, first mate? First mate? Why am I not the captain of this ship? Oh, don't worry. The first mate actually does all of the important stuff. I'm just the charismatic figure. Aye, aye, Captain. To where is our new heading? It's amazing we get any work done, I said in a passively serious tone. We both laughed. As I write now in my journal, to clarify to any would-be reader, beside the most likely case being worms, by our joking exchange of course correction, we were talking about inputting some command values, being our new heading, as the hypercube executed them, altering our destination through experimentation in this wild but true story. And alas, I've already given away too much. Let us continue. As I typed up the command, a new sense of accomplishment was dawning upon us. The air was tense with anticipation, and all the potential energy 10 dedicated years holds. Praying with an internal hope, I pushed the execute button. At that moment, the best explanation for what occurred next was that all the vibrational energy penned up within my body had somehow been released and externalized, radiating as a shimmering point in the center of the device's viewing window. "We've done it," Fred excitingly said. "But done what?" I conjectured, as I saw the point, once an observable speck, growing in size. With the texture of a hologram, taking on the shape of a cube, having nowhere to run, we were enveloped and diffused through the threshold, lost in something we thought we knew. A hypercube is a hypothesized object composed of everything we can perceive in our current state, with the addition of another line to walk on, as it were. Imagine being where you are at this moment, with the addition of a set of stairs that previous you couldn't see. These stairs take you to a place, just like the stairs you are familiar with the exception being that these stairs take you to different times, which is really just another location, giving your life an additional sense of dimension. What Percy felt at that moment was hard to describe, like being pinned between all things without being crushed. He could feel the flow of reaction, in that something which had occurred before time happened simultaneously long after it had occurred. The cascade of events being a fluid dynamic, where things had already happened before they had even come to pass. The speed of infinity was like not moving at all because everything already was. His vision coming back to him, but as it did, he almost lost a sense of what he could see. For the moment, he felt like a child again, in that time was trying to catch up to him and grab him. He became sad and slowly losing what he had felt, like he was so small and unnoticeable that he could stare off into anything without feeling like anything could stare back. Growing in size, what he perceived as large began to shrink. A feeling of being rushed came upon him like a wave, no longer allowing him to be lost in his gaze, identity coming back to him. He knew he had to hurry before he was gone. The smell told him he was now awake, but he questioned whether or not what he had experienced was a dream. Where was he anyway? Not in the lab, that was for sure. And where was Fred? He appeared to be laying on grass, but it was unlike any sort of grass he had ever seen. Almost a seafoam green, feeling more fluffy, like a soft blanket than grass. But the smell told him it was alive. The light was extremely easy on the eyes, and looking out into the sky, the atmosphere had some sort of glow that caused him to feel warm by just looking at it. That Boy Scout jest by Fred earlier seemed very apt now, and he was glad he had participated in the program as he tried to decipher where it is that he was. Deciding to follow the terrain was his best bet, he supposed, to finding someone that could help him out. Climbing atop a little knoll, he perceived what he thought to be a waterway, following the curvature of the land. He would let gravity and water carve his path for him, which would hopefully lead him to people. Now on his way, the notion of concern crept into his mind, something put out of place upon him initially reacting towards survival, but now made aware on his monotonous walk. The plant life here, however, was enough to keep his mind distracted, and when he first came across the water, he questioned if that's what it was initially. It was so smooth that it looked like it was solid, yet was so clear that it looked like nothing was there. The gentle motion of foliage cleaving to the bottom of the stream was the only thing that told him it was there. Just as he was wondering if there was any wildlife in this place, a fish scurried at his sight off into the distance, or at least he thought it was a fish. He didn't know if it had looked so odd due to it moving quickly through the water, a trick of the light being refracted upon by its surface, or if it was even a fish at all. He pushed the thought far from his mind. although to say that he wasn't in some far-off foreign land would be totally disregarding the moments before he had found himself here. Knowing with what they were working on, it wasn't without reason that any number of seemingly impossible things had happened. He felt tired at the thought of having traveled so far to have found himself somewhere so exotic, and not sensing any danger, feeling quite comfortable in the environment, he laid down and fell asleep. Percy, Percy, wake up. That voice, it was so familiar, yet he felt like the last time he had been able to hear it was so far away. Percy! Jarring, he awoke, thinking for a minute that he was back in the lab, knowing without a doubt that this was Fred's voice. And the last time he had heard his name like that was from Fred in their lab. Opening his eyes, dismayed at the sight that he was definitely not in his lab, but joyed to see Fred's outstretched hand reaching down toward him. Welcome to New Haven. Surprised, but less than he should be, to see Fred, he grabbed his hand and was soon pulled to his feet. Fred was wearing an entirely different outfit than the last time he had seen him, and he somehow looked older but younger, like the environment had granted him a prime age. Fred, I exclaimed, am I glad to see you. Still wearing your lab coat, I see. Well, first things first, you've got to dress to fit the season, and those clothes went out of fashion ages ago. Glad to have been woken with a joke rather than catastrophe, he smiled, but couldn't help but focus on how Fred had emphasized ages ago. Fred turned to one of the many individuals who Percy had just noticed were surrounding them, and was handed what looked to be some clothes that everyone else was wearing, that Fred now extended toward Percy. Here, and now? Percy said, exaggerated. Sorry, I've been here so long I forgot how shy previous generations were. And just as he said that, everyone seemed to know what was going on as they moved away to give him some privacy. I want you to really be able to feel where you are, and it would be hard to give you a proper tour if you look like you didn't belong. Having known Fred for as long as I had, I trusted him, grabbed the clothes, and he left me to myself, giving me the privacy to dress. As I put on the new clothes, my senses were tricked. I had the feeling that I was still completely naked, but my eyes told me otherwise, realizing now how heavy and uncumbersome the clothes I had just been wearing were. Just as I thought this, Fred came out from being outside my vision, startling me some. Amazing, aren't they? Grown, actually. The process fairly automatic. Once a specific amount of activation energy is overcome, the whole process being a feat of intellectual strength, rather than prolonged hours using others to harvest and weave materials together in a third world country. Shocked at what he had just heard, but even more shocked at how Fred had just came back as soon as he was done getting dressed. How did you know I was done? I expressed. You'll get used to it, Fred said, smiling. Things around these parts are more so felt rather than anything. Intrigued, but somehow wary about this explanation. The group began to walk away. Well, are you coming? Fred expressed. Walking with the group, he now had time to process his company. Everyone looked very fit, but not overly worked. They were hard, but looked comfortable. Their skin looked like a perfectly bronzed marshmallow, and their other features hinted that they somehow resided in a place that received the perfect amount of sunlight. They know that you're thinking about them. What? It comes with the territory, said Fred. Think of it like a muscle, having the ability to transmit and to receive upon a basic principle like moving your arm. They don't mind though. It's perfectly reasonable to do such things, given with what you've been through. Well, why can't I hear them? Simple, one of them now speaking. To be bombarded by such an amount of information initially, without being equipped to handle such an overload of information, would, for lack of a better expression, shut you down. In other words, Fred said, they aren't broadcasting to you specifically, In order for you to maintain your sanity, hell, it took me ages to get it right. Like learning a new language. Well, I guess that's just what it is now, isn't it? Fred chuckled. Fred, I exclaimed in a concerned tone. How long have you been here for? Well, let's see. Around 50 years of your time, I suppose. Time is something completely different here, considering the arrangement and orbit of things. What do you mean, Fred? Are you trying to tell me that you're 85 years old? Yet you look better than me. Well, the whole experience is different. It's like being, well, a different being. Look, I can tell that you are under a great deal of stress, trying to process what is going on here. But gradually, things will start to make sense, one step at a time, or you're likely to drown. After hearing this, I knew he was right, so I calmed down. Fact of the matter is that you are actually still on what we called Earth, just in a different time, somewhere far, and I mean far in the future. As he said those last words, they were in a somewhat of a different environment. How long they had been walking in what looked to now be a city was up for debate, as what he now perceived as buildings were inescapably similar in their appearance to have an ambiance that looked frighteningly similar to the untouched landscape. Like a gigantic crystal, they towered above him. Amazing, isn't it? They believed that buildings, just like structures, such as trees, come out of the earth and are natural extensions of its life force, even though it was them who built them. But after all, where did they come from? The whole planet, as it were, evolved as it crystallized into what you now see before you. Energy, not a problem, as the natural arrangement of components reacts and transmits to give off all the energy you could ever need or ever want. Each building, and the entire city in fact, is like a functioning computer, which in reality, when you think about it, is just a pile of dirt arranged in a specific manner. Fascinating. He looked at it all with wonder and awe, feeling as though he was somehow back in time with the primitive people who were somehow far, far ahead of his own time. To be continued.